Hey everyone, it's Hadar. Today I am happy to share with you an interview I held with Mariana from DLanguages. Mariana speaks 4 languages: Romanian, Russian, English, and Spanish. She teaches English in Spanish, and she has the most incredible story. In the interview, you will hear about how she had to move to Spain at the age of 16 and learn 2 languages at the same time, and she's going to tell you how she did it and what helped her succeed. She's also going to share with you her journey as a teacher from a student and what she does today and how she helps thousands of her students. I cannot wait to share with you this inspiring and funny and incredible story. So let's watch the interview. Hi, Mariana.
Hello, hello. How's it going?
I'm good. So happy to have you here.
Me too. Thank you. Thank you so much for just inviting me and showing interest in my story.
Because your story is interesting, and I cannot wait for my audience to get to know you and hear your story because I think it's so inspiring and energizing. So,
Thank you.
For those who don't know you, what do you say when people ask you to introduce yourself?
That's a good question. So, well, I start with my name, which is Mariana Plesco. And I'm originally from Moldova. Moldova is the tiny, I usually explain where Moldova is because people usually don't know. So Moldova, it's a tiny country in the Eastern Europe between Ukraine and Romania. Mm-hmm. I was born there and lived there until I was 16 years old. And then I moved to Spain. So I lived there for 15 years. Yeah,
15 years.
Yeah.
And just for people who don't know what language is spoken in Moldova.
That's right. So my mother tongue is Romanian. This is the language that we speak there. That's the official language of Moldova. And I also speak Russian because Russian is an ex-Soviet country. So growing up, the TV was all in Russian. Dubbed in Russian. So I learned Russian by watching TV. And so I speak Romanian, Russian, and then...
Wait. So the 2 languages that you grew up in, basically, are actually not the languages that you use today to speak, live, and teach.
Not at all.
Okay, so
and funny enough, those 2 languages, Russian and Romanian, are not similar at all. Like they have nothing to do with each other. You know, the alphabet, the spelling, the sounds are so different. So yeah, Romanian is a Latin language and Russian is, I don't know, like a Slavic language. So when I moved to Spain, I learned Spanish and English at the same time. So I speak Spanish and English. And these are 2 languages that I use right now. So Spanish, Romanian and Russian, I barely use them. I speak, sometimes with my family from Moscow, I use Russian. It's a little bit rusty, I must say. And
You're forgiven. It's okay.
It's okay, yeah. Because it's cool to know. I understand it 100%. Now, when it comes to speaking, I need a little bit of time to just remember the words. So I speak Romanian with my mom, but it's not a clean Romanian, it's like a mix between Romanian, Russian, Spanish. It's absolutely crazy. People would not understand us, so we have like our own language.
I love it.
It's great. That's the beauty of knowing so many languages, and you just mix them up. People that are fluent in many languages, I'm sure they do exactly the same thing. They know it.
Yeah, and I think that when they try to recollect a word from one language, then probably a word from a different language comes up.
For sure. And it's funny because when we speak with our family from Moldova, we use sometimes a word in Spanish and we don't even realize it. And they're like, what is that? It's like, I don't know that word. So it's like, okay, how do I say that? Because we keep using the same word in Spanish, Yeah. So,
just to get it straight. So at the age of 16, you moved to Spain.
That's right.
And until that age, have you learned Spanish or English?
no, I did not learn Spanish at all. So when I moved to Spain, I did not speak Spanish at all. My level was zero.
Wow.
And English, I learned English at school, the basics, grammar and the verb to be, and,
Yeah.
this base.
ING at the
Exactly.
end.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So
Good.
the basics. So I was not really fluent. I was not able to communicate my thoughts clearly in
Mhm.
English, but I knew something. I was able to say something in English. Spanish, I was not able to say anything.
And I'm assuming that in Spain, most people don't even speak English. Like back then when you moved,
Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
you needed Spanish to
I needed
survive.
Spanish. I needed Spanish. So, what the funny thing was that when I moved to Spain, literally the next day, my parents sent me to school. So I was not speaking
Wow.
Spanish. I
A
went straight
Spanish
to
school,
school.
like in
To,
Spanish.
yeah, yeah,
Wow.
everything was in Spanish. So it's like, like going now to China and speak
Figure it
Chinese.
out.
Yeah, figure it out.
Wow.
So it was the first day it was so stressful. It's like, when you try to teach a baby how to swim, you just like, throw it into the swimming pool,
Not
and
necessarily a good idea.
not necessarily a good idea. Yes. I mean, I had no choice.
You had
So
no choice.
I literally learned Spanish, like the basics, in 3 months. So that was great.
How do you manage? Okay, as a teenager at the age of 16, so on one hand, you feel like, okay, all this incredible change, like moving from one country to another, then you need to acquire the language, you want to make friends because you want to be socially accepted.
For sure.
um what did you do? How did you manage to learn it so quickly?
So the advantage of knowing Romanian. So Romanian and Spanish are Latin languages. So
Mhm.
there are words that are very similar. So I was trying to understand, I was able to understand some things because they resonated with me, because
Yeah,
Romanian was very similar. Like, for example, mesa, it's table, and masa, it's table in Romanian.
interesting.
So mesa, it's in Spanish, and masa, it's in Romanian. So some words were very similar, and I was able to understand, put them together. It was more intuition. So I was
Yeah.
just basing my my understanding on the intuition. Many times I'd fail. Many times I was like, okay, I didn't understand that properly. Um, Sometimes I'd make silly mistakes. People would laugh, but not because they would bully me or anything. It was just honestly funny.
Yeah.
So yeah, they found it funny, and this is how you learn. So I learned from my mistakes so quickly. And I adopted this mentality of, okay, this is not my language. This is not my mother tongue. I am learning. It's okay to make mistakes. It's fine. Let's have fun with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was stressful, frustrating, super frustrating, because you felt like you're dumb. You're not able to express anything, and you have so many things to say, and you feel like you have a lock here. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And you're not able to say anything. You're not able to. And then when someone asked you a question, the questions were like, oh my god, please don't ask me any questions. Please don't ask me any questions, because it's like, it's you feel scared of not understanding the question, and then looking ridiculous, you
Yeah.
know and
Yeah.
then asking to repeat, like to repeat themselves is like, oh my god, it's like asking for such a huge favor, you know but
Which is really not. Like, this is
it's not.
definitely something that inhibits people now as, language partners or conversation partners. We know that if someone asks us to repeat ourselves, not a big deal.
It's
But
okay.
when we don't know how to ask for help, you know? So I think this is something that was, that having that experience, I'm sure that has taught you about your now students' experience,
For
which we'll
sure.
get to.
Yeah.
I also want to mention, I think we're gonna go through your story and go back and forth between, the story and your teaching or your philosophy
For
about
sure.
teaching.
Mm-hmm.
Because it seems like, okay, so you use the word intuition, which I love. I always talk about intuition when I talk about teaching, because you gotta,
Mm-hmm.
at some point, it's not going to be clear, and you just have to trust the work that you've done, or trust your knowledge, or trust your understanding to be able to continue in a conversation. So I love that. I also think that a word that came to my mind was resourceful. It felt like you were very resourceful. You were just figuring things out, and you made it work no matter what. Like, you could have said, I'm not going to school. I
Mm-hmm.
know stories of people who immigrated and their kids said, I'm not going to school,
Yeah.
because they were so afraid. So
Yeah.
you could have said that, but you said, no, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to make it work. And the fact that you kept going, whether if it was in school or in a conversation, made it possible for you to see that progress in such a short time. Of course, you were very immersed in it, and the similarities in the language.
For sure. Yeah.
Um, what did you take from that experience to what is now your teaching?
So where I'm coming from, you don't have an option of not doing, so that's the mentality. So when you don't give yourself an option of no, no is not an option, you just have to do it. So this is what I always tell my students: just don't give yourself an option of not learning English. you know
Yeah.
you have
Yeah.
to do it.
There is
So
no alternative.
no
Yeah.
alternative. In Spanish we say sí or sí.
I
Yes
love it.
or
Yes
yes,
or yes.
yes. Like there's no option. So not going to school was not an option for me. Not learning Spanish was not an option for me, and not learning English was also not an option for me. Because I didn't need to learn English living in Spain. It was just a passion and a dream of mine.
Mhm.
But I didn't give myself an option of not doing it.
So tell me more about that. How did you manage everything?
So Spanish was a necessity, really. I needed to survive. That's why I learned it. And I was very lucky because at school, one of my classmates was English. She was from England. So I was
Mhm.
able to communicate with my broken English with her, at least at the beginning. And yeah, so because of her, I was able to practice my English, learning Spanish at the same time.
Wow.
And then at home, I was just, I basically listened to things in English, watched everything in English. It was like Spanish and English. So I worked a lot with movies. So I always loved movies, and I was watching those movies that I grew up with. I don't know, like Home Alone. And those movies, I watched them in Russian, right? So everything was dubbed in Russian. So since I already knew those movies like by heart, I knew the dialogue by heart, I would watch the same movie in English and then the same movie in Spanish. So I was like, oh, so this is in Russian. Okay, so this is how you say it in Spanish. And this is how you say it in English.
So
You know?
good.
Yeah.
Yeah, very smart.
Yeah, so you work with things that you're familiar with,
Yeah.
or books that I'd read, for example, Harry Potter, right? So I read the first book in Romanian. I was very familiar with that. I loved it. And then I'd read the same book in Spanish, and then the same book in English. I'm saying it's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work.
You
But
need
it seemed
you
like you were very passionate about it.
exactly. It's you have to put in the work. It's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen. There's no magic, pill. There's no magic in it. You just have
No
to
magic.
work. Exactly.
Yeah.
And so this is what I would do. So I am outside home. I was surrounded by Spanish speaking people. At school I had to study the subject, all the subjects in Spanish. But at home I created an English environment, right? So if I was in the kitchen, in the background I'd have something on the computer, like a video or something, a movie, whatever, spoken English, so my
Yeah.
ear get used.
In loops, probably you repeated a lot of the same
For
content.
sure, yes.
Yeah.
Like the same thing. So, not just like a video, worked with it for a few minutes and then continued to the next one, No, I worked with the same one. So
Yeah.
the more I listened to it, the more things I was able to understand. And yeah, so it was like that. And then I would read in English. I would chat with people on Facebook. So I would join these random groups about topics I was interested in, and I was interested in fitness and eating healthy and all that stuff. So I met a girl from Estonia who lived. She's my friend now, who lives in Ireland. So she speaks Russian and English. So I would
Oh,
chat with her in English, and then if there was something that I didn't know, I would ask her in Russian. So she would help
amazing.
me, you
Yeah.
know. So it's just like that.
So, for someone listening to your story, and I'm trying to kind of like collect all the things that you said that you did. So, here are a few things that you mentioned just to summarize up until this point.
Hmm.
One of the things that helped you was to watch a movie that you knew that was maybe previously dubbed in Russian. In your case, for other people, especially in countries where TV is dubbed or movies are dubbed,
Hmm.
then in your first language, so you know the content and you know the
That's right.
dialogue,
Hmm.
then to watch it in your target language, in our case, probably English,
English, yeah.
so that you're not struggling to understand the story, but you pay attention to the content. And then
Hmm.
to probably watch it over and over and over again and not just try to go through as many pieces of content or movies as possible, but to really focus on something that allows you to go deeper.
That's right. So that's why you have to work with something that you love. A book that you absolutely love, a movie that you adore, that you don't mind watching
You
it
need to
over and over
enjoy
again.
it. Yes, it
Exactly.
has to be fun. This is also
Exactly.
really critical. Yeah, and immerse yourself, right? Like you said, you surrounded yourself with English. It was always in the background. So people who are not immersed in English, this could help because
For
it
sure.
obviously worked for
Absolutely.
you.
I lived in Spain, right? So I learned English in Spain, and I haven't been to any English speaking country up until 2019. And
Amazing.
uh I've been thank you. I have been teaching English since 2011.
Hmm.
Okay, so it was like I learned English living in Spain, and in Spain, English is not their mother tongue, right?
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter where you are in the world. Right now, with technology, it's so much easier to immerse yourself in the language. You just create your environment at home,
Yeah.
the English
Yeah.
environment at home, and learn. And you know what? Here in the United States, there are so many people that live here but don't speak English because they surround themselves with people that speak Spanish in this case, so
Yes.
most of my students are from Latin America, are Spanish speakers, and yeah, they've been living here for 30 years, 20 years, and they don't speak English because they don't surround themselves with English speaking people,
Yeah.
so it doesn't matter if you live in a country where English is spoken.
I just had a student yesterday in one of my coaching sessions, and this is exactly what he said. He said, I live in Florida, but it doesn't mean anything because
Exactly.
most of my life I've lived in a Spanish speaking community,
That's
which
right.
makes it challenging. So you got to find solutions to allow yourself to communicate, and it doesn't have to be physical. Like you can
Hmm.
definitely find solutions online. And your story and many other stories of people who were able to achieve fluency despite the fact that they never visited an English speaking country or never had friends to speak with. You can find solutions. It's all about resourcefulness, and you are the example for that. Like you find partners, so it's really good for people to see that it is possible.
Absolutely. And if there is nobody you can talk with, just talk with yourself, because I was talking with myself all the time. It's just, you have to,
So that's
So,
another good tip. Like talk to yourself. Can you
yeah.
tell us how you did it?
Yeah. So, for example, I would name the things that I'd see, or things that I was doing. So, if I was cooking, and I was peeling a potato, I would ask myself, how would I say peeling a potato in English or in
Mm.
Spanish? You know what I'm saying? Because it was at the same time, right? So, just question yourself. If you see a person walking the dog, right, outside your window, how would you say in English, walk the dog? So like ask yourself in your mother tongue, how would I say this in English? How would I say that in English? Name the things that you see, name the things that you are doing. Question yourself, like for example, if you're writing something in your schedule or your diary, how would I say that in English? So
Yeah.
this way it's so much easier right now because you have translators, online translators. You can find the answer immediately. You can check your mistakes. You can correct your mistakes. I always tell my students this: say the sentence in English the way you think it's correct, right? Then type that sentence in Spanish in the translator. The translator will translate it into English, and then you check the sentence of the translator and your sentence, and you can correct yourself.
Mm.
You know,
Yep,
so it's so much easier right now
it
to
is.
communicate. To speak in English by yourself.
Yeah. Okay, this is really, really good. What else did you do? Like, is there another uh, tip or trick that you can teach us that you use to learn Spanish and English?
Yeah. What else? So in terms of pronunciation, the pronunciation is really important, and I would listen to songs
Mhm.
and I would repeat them, right? So I would sing along, not to learn words or to learn expressions or anything, because the lyrics of the songs, in my opinion, are so much different from the spoken English. So I never recommend my students to focus on the lyrics of the songs, because it's sometimes it's not the spoken version of
Yeah,
English.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But when you listen to songs and repeat, sing along, your pronunciation improves.
Mhm.
So I was improving my pronunciation like this. I would just listen to the song and I was trying to copy the singer exactly the same way, the exact same tone. This is one way I was improving my pronunciation. Then another way, I was just listening to audios and applying the shadowing technique. The shadowing
Mhm.
technique is, for those people that don't know, is basically copying the native speaker, um, exactly, like the tone, the pauses, the in the exactly the pronunciation, everything you hear, you just shadow, you just copy that person. So I would just work the same tongue twisters. I would just say tongue twisters in English and
Love
Spanish.
tongue twisters.
Hmm.
Yeah.
They're fun.
Okay, amazing. So moving along to the moment you said, I love English so much, I want to teach it, or maybe it was just like a random decision that ended up changing your life. What was it like?
It was a random. It was not even a decision. It was just like it popped into my life, and it's like, okay, I have to do it. So everything started when I moved to Madrid. So when I moved to Spain, I was living in a tiny village in the east of Spain. So I was living with my parents, and then I moved to Madrid when I was 18, and I convinced my parents to pay for my rent and my food until I found a job. And I was studying. I was finishing my high school, and I was struggling a
Wait,
lot.
wait, wait, wait. So you moved to Madrid on your own before you even finished high school.
Exactly, before I
Very
finished high
brave.
school. Yeah, because when I moved to Spain, my Spanish was not good, so I lost 1 year because they basically put me into a lower grade. So
Mhm.
I lost 1 year, and so I was 18, but I didn't finish high
Got
school.
it.
And also I took a gap year. Yeah, I was on a gap year as
Mhm.
well. And yeah, to learn Spanish and English, to improve these two languages. So basically, I was a little bit behind. I was determined to finish high school. So I went to Madrid to finish high school, and also just to start my life, you know. And I was struggling because I couldn't find a job. So I was looking for a job. I was 18. Nobody was hiring. You have no experience, the same crap. And I was living on 50 euros a month because the lady who who I was renting from uh, increased the rent out of the blue.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, so basically that left me with 50 euros a month for food. So I was desperate, and I could not ask my parents for more money because they would have told me, come back, we don't have more money.
Yeah.
And going back for me was not an option because I did not like living in that village. It was too tiny. So one day I was on my way to the bank to, to take out money for rent. And then my bank disappeared. It was just gone. Poof. So I was like, okay, what
Oh
is
my
going on?
God.
It was because they were like merging the banks in Madrid at that
Okay.
point, yeah. So suddenly my bank was gone. And instead of it, there was like a shoe store. I'm like, what the heck? Where's my bank? And then I could not go to a different bank because they would charge me, like the fees. So I could
And you
not
couldn't afford
afford
it.
exactly. So I was like, I needed that bank specifically. So I was walking down the street and I saw a girl smoking. I approached her and I asked her, "Can you please tell me where I can find this in this bank?" And she says, like, "I have no idea, but if you want, I can Google it for you." That was in 2011. And so Google was around. And I was super happy. I was like, yes, of course, please. You did me a great favor. So we went inside. She was a receptionist. And while she was searching for that bank, I was looking around and I saw different doors, many doors. And on
Mm.
each door, there was a name of a scientist, like uh, Einstein, Newton. I was like, what is this place? So I turned around and asked her, can you please tell me what this is? And she's like, oh, it's an academy. I was like, uh-huh. So what do you teach here? Well, we teach different languages. We teach math. We teach history, all these like subjects for school, like support for students that need help. I'm like, okay, languages. I heard languages. So do you teach Russian? I was like, no, we don't teach Russian, but we do teach English. And we just had a marketing campaign, and we
Mhm.
have a lot of students, and we're looking for 50 new teachers, English
Oh
teachers.
my
Yeah.
goodness.
I'm like, what? And she was like, do you speak English? And I was like, I had 3 seconds to answer that question. It's like, sure.
C or C, right?
C or C. Sure. I was starving. I
Wow.
needed a job. So I was like, yeah, sure. Yes, I speak. So she was like, would you like to come to an interview? I'm
Wow.
like, yes. Okay.
Oh, I
Like,
got goosebumps.
I was like, yes, okay. And she was like, all right, great. So I would need this document, this information, this information. So she gave me the information of the bank. She found the bank. I went to the bank, got my money, went home, paid the landlord, got the documents she needed, went back, left all those documents there, gave the documents, and then a few days later she called me and invited me to an interview. And I was like, what am I doing? What am I doing? I don't speak English well enough to teach it. And I was like, okay, so they will probably test my English and they will find out that I'm I'm a scam and I don't really speak English. And then I was like, okay, well, what's the worst that can happen, right? And then I went.
Yeah.
And then Hadar. It was not an interview at all. You go there because it was such a shitty, academy. They didn't care
They
about
just wanted you to know
you.
yes, no, maybe.
They did not care if you spoke English or not. They believed you. You know what I'm saying? So it was great for me, not so good for the
Wow.
students. And that was my window, basically. This is how I started teaching English. So the interview was basically, okay, so this is how we do it here. You go to students' houses, you have to prepare the classes, and then you have a paper, you sign here, you make the students sign it here, you write down how many hours you taught that day. And then at the end of the month, we're going to give you your money in cash. So there's
Wow.
not even a bank transfer or anything. So it
It was
was
a
like under the
dream for
table.
you. Could not be better.
Yes. I'm like, oh my goodness, I cannot believe it. So first class, I was super nervous. The first class was a complete disaster.
Oh no.
Because the student knew more English than me. So it was like, okay, I have to get my things together, like I have to prepare, like really prepare. So I started Googling, I started investigating and researching, right? Like how to prepare a class. And I was like, okay, I'm an actor, right? I have to act like an English teacher.
Get into the
So
character.
like really, really, okay, so that was literally my first acting job. And then I was going to school, right? So at school I was studying English as well, because that's one of the subjects that you have to study. So I was like, okay, I'm going to use my school book, right? So I'm going to use the text that I've already studied in class with my English teacher. I already know what it is about. I already know the answer to the exercises related to the text. So I'm going to work with that. I've always had a good pronunciation, so that kind of saved me, because when you
Mhm.
have a good pronunciation, you give the impression that your English is amazing, even though it's not true. You know,
Mhm.
so
Yeah.
I was able to
Yeah.
get by. Hmm.
Yeah, and I think this is such a good point. First, because yes, this is why I think a lot of people want pronunciation, because they know that because when they listen to others, this is what they feel. But at the same time, and I'm sure you have felt that, this is where it could create the imposter syndrome, or kind of like trigger it, because that people expect of you to be at a certain level, and then they might question
For sure.
other
Every
things.
single
So as
mistake that you make, and yeah,
yeah, so as a non-native speaker, you're constantly wrapped up with those thoughts about how you're perceived, what you are doing, how you're doing it, how you're performing. I think this is something that a lot of people, a lot of non-native speaking teachers experience. And that was how many years ago that was?
that was 12 years ago.
12 years ago, a
Yeah,
long time ago.
a long time ago. Yeah, yeah, a long time ago. So so the pronunciation is important, because it gives you that, right, prestige, right? It gives you
Mhm.
the image of sounding good. Um, but yeah, it's definitely, I had the imposter syndrome for a long time. Sometimes I make mistakes. This is the reality, is that this is not my mother tongue. I speak it well, I think, well enough to teach it right now. And just because you speak a language, it doesn't matter that you know how to teach it. I speak Spanish, Russian, and Romanian, and I have no idea how to teach those languages. Like,
Yeah.
it's there's no way I can teach them. I know how to speak them, but I don't know how to explain to you how to use a certain tense. I don't know what's the difference between one word and the other.
Yeah. Yeah.
So uh
It's so important to know how to facilitate. Being a native speaker doesn't automatically make you a good teacher.
absolutely not.
Yeah. And
Not at all.
one more thing, and I think, and I read somewhere in an article that was published recently, we'll also link to it. It's on your Instagram account, and you said that 50% of your teaching is teaching English and 50% is helping your students build confidence. Can you speak more about that,
Absolutely.
and how your past has created that belief in you, or philosophy, teaching philosophy?
For sure. So as years went by and I gained more experience and more knowledge, because when I really learned English, it was by teaching, because I had to prepare those classes, right? So I had to really memorize everything that I didn't know. I really had to I spent hours and hours preparing for classes to teach them later,
Yeah.
and repeat, right? So repetition. So I would use the same class with one student, and then with the another student, with the other student, and another. So repetition was the key. And then what I found out was that many students had a really good level, but their confidence sucked. They were not confident, So that's how I found out that 50% of my work as a teacher was to make them confident, to help them believe in themselves, believe that the knowledge that they have, the English that they have right now, the level that they have right now is enough to communicate, to get rid of the fears, because there's fear, and fear of making mistakes. It's like, oh my God, it has to be perfect. It's like, no, native speakers make mistakes all the time. Like, there's so many people. There is not correct, but it's used all the time, and it's okay.
And here's the thing, like, yes, native speakers make mistakes all the time, but also if you do make a mistake, so what? Like, what's the worst thing that could happen? Going back to that question you asked, what would that mean? Would that really make you less intelligent, less proficient, less competent? No, it just makes you a non-native speaker speaking.
It makes you human.
Human. Exactly.
It's just that. It doesn't mean anything, really. We make mistakes constantly, and I think we have to have fun with that. Just have fun with it.
Not to take ourselves too seriously.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I agree, and I think that unless you give yourself that permission to make mistakes, you will not be able to feel free, because you'll constantly monitor yourself. You'll be on the outside checking that every single word you say is perfect. Like, I make mistakes all the time when I speak freely, because I don't monitor my speech, and I'm okay with that, because I value that energy that comes out and expressing my thoughts and feelings and emotions and connecting with a person.
I'm being in the moment.
And being in the moment, being attentive, listening, not thinking about myself, but thinking about you right now as we're speaking. And I know that's the mistakes is the price that I pay for being here with you. And I'm sure, like, this is what I try to teach my students as well, that they have to change their mindset. And I know that you do that as well. They have to change their mindset to be able to make that shift, because when you give yourself permission, you find freedom. So Can you talk to me more about that as well, and how you communicate that to your students?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's I always encourage them to make mistakes and be happy to make those mistakes, because that's the way to learn. That is really the only way to learn. How else are you going to learn?
Yeah.
It's trial and error. And this is how everything works. Like, we were not born experts in anything, so we needed to make mistakes in order to learn. So I always try to make them feel comfortable and give them the most positive and happy energy. I want them to. I'm always trying, and my objective is always to make them feel good and feel comfortable with me.
Yeah. They have to feel safe
and not judgmental. Like, I never judge them, and if they make a mistake, I always correct, and I explain why. And there's like, it's fine, and I always tell them, you'll probably make the same mistake several times before you actually register it. And it's okay. Don't worry about it.
That is the process.
That's right.
Impossible for it to happen any other way. So
Exactly. But it's everything in life is like this, but for whatever reason, with languages, we're so obsessed of not making mistakes, because I don't know, I guess it's a belief that we got it from somewhere, I guess from schools or something. I don't know.
Probably, but perfection in general, and not being, making mistakes in general. I think this is a cultural norm that is ingrained in us in a lot of cultures, not all cultures, but
For
definitely
sure.
Western culture. So you teach English in Spanish, really?
That's right. So it's funny, huh? Because none of these languages are my mother tongues.
Exactly. So how does it feel to teach English in Spanish? Is it just because what you why did you choose to do it, and why your entire business and your Instagram account and the content that you create is in Spanish and English? Tell me about that.
Yeah, because I started it in Spain. So I started teaching English to Spanish people, right? So this is that's how everything started. And right now my brain function like this. Like I'm not able to teach English in English, or I'm not able to teach English in Russian or in Romanian. Like it
So
doesn't work like
interesting.
this. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I tried to help my cousin's son with English. He had an exam, and he needed my help. And he speaks Russian, and I was trying to explain to him some like basic things like present simple and present continuous, And I was trying to explain to him in Russian, and it was absolutely impossible, Hadar.
It's so
Absolutely impossible.
interesting how that
Yeah.
works. Yeah.
Because my brain is used to explaining English in Spanish.
Yeah.
This is how
I
it works.
had I had an interview in Hebrew for the news, and I was on the news, and I was like, I should stop saying yes to those interviews, because talking about my work in English, like, I know how to do it in English. I don't know how to do it in my first language. I don't have the vocabulary. It's not that accessible. And I use my first language all the time. So it's not like it's rusty or anything.
Yeah.
It's just that when you're focused on specific content, it's hard to shift and feel as comfortable in another language, even if it's
Yeah.
your first language. So I totally get it.
It's crazy how it's like you associate. So you associate this topic with a certain language.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like kids, like if kids grew up in a bilingual home, right? The mother speaks one language and the father another. So kids associate, okay, mother Spanish, father English, and they will change immediately. If the mother speaks to them in Spanish, they will immediately switch to Spanish,
Yeah.
and they will not mix it. you know
It's
so
amazing.
it's the same. Yeah, that's why I teach English in Spanish, because I started teaching English while I was living in Spain, and yeah, so my brain basically associates English, teaching English, with Spanish.
Okay, that's great. What are the advantages for people to learn the language in their first language? I think there are plenty of advantages. So, like, why do you believe that it's important for people at least to get started learning English in their first language?
In their first language, you mean
In
like
Spanish. So Spanish speakers
a Spanish
should
speaker to learn
Mhm.
English?
to learn English in Spanish. Because
Uh-huh.
yeah,
Like,
because
so
a
the
lot of times,
explanation.
so I'll give you some background.
Uh-huh.
In my community, there are a lot of teachers,
Uh-huh.
and they sometimes, if they want to start a business, they don't know if they should be creating content in their first language, teaching English, or in English, teaching English. And they feel, they have this belief that it's very limiting, or they would feel very limited creating in their first language. So I would love
Okay.
for you to speak about the advantages in teaching English in another language.
So I guess it all depends on how popular your mother tongue is, because in the case of Spanish, it's very popular.
Mhm.
So like half of
Right.
the world speaks Spanish, right? So it's definitely advantageous. Now, I guess it all depends on how comfortable you are teaching English in your mother tongue or teaching English in English. It all depends. Um, I've never thought of teaching English in another language or in English, for example, because it was never an option for me. But I guess it depends on how comfortable you are with the language. So
Mhm.
if you're comfortable teaching English in English, go ahead and do it. Because what matters, I think people shouldn't focus on how many views they get and how popular those videos are gonna be. They should focus on teaching, you know,
Right.
to focus on good content, on educational content that will actually help people. Should focus on helping people rather than the views, the likes, and going viral.
Absolutely. And I definitely think that for people who are less experienced in hearing English or listening to English, there is a huge advantage when it's facilitate to them, when they have an easier entry into English, because a lot of times people who don't have a lot of experience listening to English, they may not understand, let's say, a video or content or a lesson that is fully in English. Yeah.
Yeah,
So I think
it's so it depends on the level of the person, you know. So if you're just starting out, you will not be able to understand a class in English. So that's the advantage of teaching, you know. So maybe your audience is people that who's just starting out with English, you
yeah.
know.
Yeah. Mariana, this was such an incredible conversation, and you have such an interesting story.
Thank you.
What are your best piece of advice when it comes to learning, to self-learners, people who want to learn English on their own?
I think they have to just use the language as much as possible. Just get out there, you know, just go outside and start speaking in English. Stop
Yeah.
learning those grammar rules. Stop, learning the theory. I always give this analogy. How did we learn, all of us, most of us, how did we learn to bike? Taking the bike and riding it, right? This is
Yeah.
how it probably will fell so many times, got bruised knees, scratched knees, right? And this is how we learn. But once we learned it, we will never forget. So
Right.
English is very similar. Just grab it and write it. you
Yeah.
know?
You can't visualize yourself riding your bike and then being able to do it the next day. Well, for
Exactly.
the most part. Yeah. So I
Just
absolutely agree.
just do it.
Yeah.
Just do it. Speak it. Read it. Write it. Use the language. If you
Yeah.
don't use it, you lose it, right?
And don't wait for it to be better to use it, because that's another thing that I see.
Well,
By the time when I learn how to use the perfect tense. No.
it will probably never happen, and in theory you probably know. So I have, like, many of my students have this the theory. They know the theory so well, the knowledge, right? They know the rules, how to use the certain tenses, but they don't know how to actually use it in the spoken English.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it doesn't matter if you know how to, on paper you know how to use it, but in reality you don't. It's useless, really. So
Yeah.
just go out there, speak English with different people. It doesn't matter if they are native or not non-native. Just speak it. Anyone who speaks English, speak English to them.
Just speak.
Just
Exactly.
do
Just
it.
do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so before we go, one last question. You recently moved to LA from Spain.
Hmm.
So where do you see yourself 1 year from today?
Where do I see myself? So I'm actually living a dream right now, living my dream. I am going to an acting school right now. It's a very nice and prestigious acting school. And I see myself continuing teaching English and also working as an actor. That's what I want to do. That's why I'm here in Los Angeles.
Yes.
So my dream is to make movies in English for my
Mhm.
students to learn from,
Shadow.
to exactly to shadow, and yeah. So basically, that make movies, keep teaching English, because for me English is not just a language; is much more than that. And I know for many people, it's really important to know. It's life changing to know this language, and I want to help people to get their dreams, to yeah, to feel happy because when you speak this language, especially when you're living here in the United States or in any other English-speaking country, and you need this language, you feel happy when you speak it. You feel part of the society, because when you don't, you feel like an outcast, you know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I want to help people get their goals and be happy, basically.
I love that. Well, I'm sure that you're going to achieve this goal in 1 year or sooner. And I wish you all the best. Thank you so much for this beautiful conversation. I really appreciate it. I appreciate you. And how can people find you?
People can find me on Instagram. So it's at DLanguages, and also on YouTube. It's the same name, at DLanguages. And these are basically two platforms that I use the most. I'm also on TikTok, the same name, and on Facebook. But I use Instagram and YouTube the most.
Fantastic. So we're going to link to these platforms in the description below, so people
Awesome.
can.
Thank you so much.
Thank
It
you so
was
much.
so nice. It was, I loved it. It was a great interview, and I love your energy. Your energy is great.
Same here. I feel like we're very similar. We broadcast on the same frequency. Oh, yeah.
Which makes it absolutely easy and wonderful to communicate and talk.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Hadar.
All right, that's it. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to learn more about what Mariana does, then just check out all the links in the description. And of course, if you want to subscribe to my channel, I'm inviting you to do so you can get weekly content about English and also inspiring content just like today's interview. Thank you so much for watching. Have a beautiful day, and I'll see you next week in the next video.